Can you rev it up?
Oh, you can. Sort of. And then it shuts off again. Oh. Man, that really does not like that when you do that.
It's a nice major chord, though.
Oh my. Did you ever take singing classes as a kid?
No. This is the band kid in me. Hey everybody, we've got such a cool video for you today because this is the all-new Toyota Prius, and in this video we're gonna find out, is the new Toyota Prius finally cool? To help me decide whether or not that has become the case,
Hey Tommy, thanks for having me again.
Sophion Bay from Redline Reviews. So Sophion, would you consider the old Prius to be a cool automobile?
No, it was never cool. I know you really thought it was cool, but we'd argue constantly how it was not cool.
Well, I thought it was cool, and admittedly I'm not very cool, so I'm not a good judge of cool, which is why I brought you in your trendy coat.
Oh, thanks.
So let's talk about this new model because it's basically entirely brand new.
Yeah, so Toyota says it's built on the TNGA-C architecture, but now in its second generation. I have to admit, Tommy, it looks really nice. Like, dare I say it, almost sexy in the design.
Well, I know that's part of the reason I think it's pretty rad. Now, the design is much more angular, it's much more swept back, and what are we looking at here in the front?
So we have like kind of a new design language for the Prius that I haven't seen before. The headlights, you can see they're full LEDs. They kind of have like this C shape to them. There's an LED turn signal, you have LED low and high beams. And then down here, I thought these were fog lights, but they're actually just accent lights for the headlights when they're on. And then you can see here, the front is very aerodynamic. There's active grille shutters, parking sensors and whatnot. So overall, Toyota did a really great job with the look.
So one thing which is interesting is if you look at the emblem, they're not doing that kind of glow behind the Toyota emblem.
Oh, there's no blue behind it.
Yeah, there's no blue outline, exactly. The one thing I don't like about this front end is this bump right here. Now this is for the front plate and it's actually molded into the front bumper. But if you don't run a front plate, if you live in a state that doesn't, you kind of got this awkward little bump there.
Yeah, does Colorado require a front plate for
We
this?
do, yeah, so it's not a problem for us, but I'd like to see that removable. Now, as we come along the side, that's really where we're gonna see a lot of the big changes. So what they've really done is move the apex of the roof. Now, the Prius kind of has this one long continuous line from front to back, which it's had for a number of generations. Now, in the old one, it kind of peaked like right here above the front seats, but in the new one, it peaks kind of more back here toward the rear. And what that gives it is this big sloping profile.
Yeah, it definitely looks great. However, Tommy, the one thing they changed is they've lowered the roof by 2 inches, which is probably going to annoy a lot of you taller folks like Tommy, for example.
Yeah, we're gonna find that out here in a second. And they also widen the car, right?
Yeah, it's about 1 inch wider and it's about a 2-inch stretch in the wheelbase and 1 inch longer. So I think they've done what they could with the proportions to make it look better, but you are going to sacrifice that interior space.
Basically, they did what Pontiac did in the 50s and 60s, lower, longer, wider, baby. And it does look really cool. Now, as we come along to the rear, we no longer have the split rear window, which the Prius has been iconic for. Now, one continuous pane of glass.
Yeah, I think that looks good. However, Tommy, I want to back up a little bit because you forgot to mention the wheels. What do you think of the new wheels, Tommy?
Well, the old Prius could be had in basically pizza-sized wheels, like 15 inches. This one is this is a huge wheel, right?
Yeah, this is a 19-inch wheel, and you're going to get that on the XLE and the Limited. However, the tire size is really narrow. It's a 195/50, which, Tommy, I don't know about you, but I've never seen that aspect ratio before.
That's wild. I mean, the wheel itself looks huge on the side of this Prius. The sidewall looks really pretty weeny. And then, of course, the width, as you mentioned, is pretty darn narrow for efficiency. And the base wheel is 17, right?
Yeah, the LE will have a 17-inch wheel with like a hub, a wheel cover, but it's an alloy wheel. But these are the 19s that you get. They reduced the MPG by 5 miles to the gallon, which is kind of significant.
Did you just censor the word hubcap?
I did.
Is that what I just heard? That's funny. That's really funny. Now, as we make our way to the back, talked about the continuous rear window. I like this little Easter egg. It says Prius here in the glass and the defroster, which is very, very cool. But I love this trend which has been going on, this continuous LED light bar. Looks pretty good.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the new Toyota Crown, which again, Toyota's trying to keep it all in the family here. And then there's also, this is the first Toyota product to get their new Beyond Zero badge. And what do you think of it, Tommy?
Well, it's going to be kind of hard to see on camera, but it's like this little circle which fades from gray to blue. And then we got the word HEV.
Because it's a hybrid.
But most Prius folks are not going to wonder.
They're not going to know what that means.
They're going to be like, what is this frat boy name doing on the back of my Prius? Yeah, exactly. And I do like this, actually. This is classy, the LTD.
Yes.
Right, not the Ford LTD, it stands for limited.
Yes.
But that's pretty cool, and then I like how they kind of incorporated this Toyota emblem here into this little black panel. It's a really pretty attractive car, especially for a Prius.
Yeah, I'd say the rear is probably my least favorite angle of the car, but everywhere else I think Toyota knocked it out of the park.
The rear is your least favorite angle?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at it dead on, I don't love the look of the rear from certain angles.
Well, at least it doesn't look like it's going to fall over
That's
at the
true.
slight fart anymore, which is good.
I mean, this is an improvement over the old one, but
It's got some width to it. It's got
It
hips, Sophion.
it definitely does.
Well, let's pop the hood and talk about mechanicals, because that's another big change to the Prius. So the old one was about as fast as walking. The new one,
It's
though,
an understatement.
it's got a lot more power.
Yeah, so Toyota has improved the power in several different ways. First of all, the gas engine is now bigger. It's a 2-liter 4-cylinder versus a 1.8. And there's also a stronger electric motor. And this model here is the all-wheel drive version, which means we have an extra motor at the back.
And this is what they call the Gen 5, right, of their
Yes.
hybrid system. Now, horsepower is up a ridiculous amount, over 70 more horsepower.
Yeah, I think they said 71 on the front drive model. This one here, however, is 75 stronger, like horses versus the previous generation, which is just insane.
Which is crazy. Yeah, we're talking nearly 200 horsepower out of a Prius. I mean, not long ago, that would have been like pretty serious into hot hatch territory. And now you can get it in an efficient hatchback.
Yeah, and they actually claim the 0 to 60 is around 7 seconds for this model, which again, the old one, Tommy, you said was about as fast as walking. So this is going to be significantly better in terms of the performance. And because of the eCVT, Toyota says you can get up to 57 mpg combined, but this model here is around 49, which is still good.
Now, another big change, if you want to come to the back here, Ian, they've really beefed up the rear motor on the Prius. So if you get it in all-wheel drive, just like the old one, you've got a separate motor which powers just the rear axle. But on the old one, I kid you not, it was 7 horsepower.
7 horsepower. The new one has 40 horsepower now.
Yeah,
Which
so-
is about what it should have had when it came out.
Enormous change there, yeah, exactly. So this is going to be a much more capable vehicle in the snow. So it looks way better. It's got way more power. It doesn't sacrifice fuel economy, but let's check out the inside. Wow, dude, so some pretty big changes going on in here.
Yeah, this car's interior finally looks more conventional. It doesn't look like this weird science experiment.
Oh, wow. Tell me how you really feel, Sophia. Now, the Prius interior has always been very open, very flowy, and there's a lot of that same motive, but some big changes, including a gauge cluster in front of the driver.
Yeah, that's taken directly from the BZ4X along with the steering wheel, and I wasn't really a fan of it in that vehicle. I don't love it here, but I do love how it finally has an instrument panel behind the steering wheel.
Now, this has always reminded me of like the Starship Enterprise, because rather than looking through the steering wheel at the cluster, unless you're very, very height challenged, you look over the steering wheel at the cluster, and it kind of makes it feel like the steering wheel's lower in your lap. Do you like that feeling?
For me, it's not really a problem because I do have to have it lower, but I imagine, like for you, Tommy, you're a lot taller. This is probably a little bit of a more awkward angle for you to look through.
It's not too bad, but it does take a little bit of getting used to. And then the steering wheel itself looks very, very video game-esque, very, very spaceship-like. It feels like we're on the way to a yoke.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they have a yoke, I think, in the Japanese market, but not here.
Do they really?
I think so. I've seen this steering wheel as a yoke in the Japanese markets, but again, it's not going to be here in the U.S.
Now, as we look at the overall dash profile, very kind of swoopy here with this continuous line. We got some cool materials, though, right? Some contrasting colors.
Yeah, I mean, this almost tries to look like a mixture of carbon and aluminum to me. I love the ambient lighting. And the other thing I'm noticing, Tommy, the dash is a lot longer now.
Right.
Like, it feels like we're almost sitting in the back seat versus the front seat. But I think the big change that older buyers will notice of the Prius is the infotainment system. The orientation has swapped from that portrait to the landscape style.
Now, speaking of kind of that long dash, one thing I don't love very much is because of that change in the apex and the roof, my head at 6 feet tall is pretty darn close to the cowl here.
Yeah, that doesn't look like super comfortable for you. If you hit a bump, your head's going to probably hit the ceiling. Like for me, it's just fine, but it does feel tight, and I'm 5'7".
Well, what I'm noticing is that this is becoming a trend in a lot of cars like the Kia EV6, and that's because of that swept back profile. But it's not so much I'm worried about hitting my head, it just feels a little bit tight in here from a headroom standpoint. Now, we do have the dual pane pano sunroof in this car.
Yeah, this doesn't open up, but at least you have two separate shades. I don't love this like plastic piece here. I just would have preferred if Toyota did it like a big piece of glass to kind of make it feel more airy. But overall, I really like the design in here. It reminds me a lot of maybe even the Toyota Crown or other Toyota products. This 12.3-inch screen, however, huge improvement over the previous generation.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's got user profiles too, right? So you can get it all set up exactly as you'd like. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay, which you're using here.
As I get a spam call.
I just got silenced your spam call, yeah. So that is quite nice. And then we also have a digital rearview mirror in this model.
Yeah, this is a $200 upcharge, which I suspect a lot of people are going to get because the view out of the back isn't great for me.
No, it really is not fantastic, especially with that small rear window. That is a nice touch. Some other things which are interesting. So we do have a very traditional kind of Prius shifter here with park reverse neutral drive, and you've got this little toggle which you go between. And then we also have different drive mode selections here with this little toggle, which is pretty neat. Wireless charger integrated there, EV mode, parking brake there, and then how's the storage here in the middle?
It's decent. It's a little bit shallow, but you get 2 more USB charging ports. And Toyota says there's a total of 6 USB-C charging ports, and this limited grade also includes heated and ventilated seats, which is a huge plus.
Very nice. All right, stay there, Sophia. I'm going to try out the rear seats. So I'm going to hop in here behind my driving position.
This is going to be fun.
So first things first, legroom is fantastic. Lots and lots of legroom. What's not so fantastic is the headroom, right?
Yeah, for somebody over 6 feet like you, Tommy, you kind of have to cantilever your head to the side.
Now, they did make a big deal about lowering the roof line a couple of inches, but that is the drawback of this vehicle. Although, 2 more USB-C outlets back here and heated rear seats.
Yeah, the heated rear seats are part of a tech package that this model has, but Tommy, I'm noticing no rear seat air vents.
No. Even in this limited trim.
Yeah, that's kind of a huge oversight, and I don't like how they didn't include that because they gave us some other features, but overall, it has about an inch more legroom, but that headroom could be a deal breaker for some people.
What's the price on this model?
So this model here is around $38,835 with destination. It's the most expensive one that you can get, aside from the fact that you can add the premium paint, which this paint is free, but still, what do you think of the price at almost 40 grand?
It's quite a bit, but when you consider the Prius starts like in the mid-20s, especially in an LE or go for an XLE, that's kind of the sweet spot, and you get a lot of standard tech like Toyota Safety Sense 3.0 with adaptive cruise control and the lane centering features. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot. Having the Limit is nice, but not necessarily needed. I say that we get this thing out on the road and see how she drives. All right, Sophia, so we're gonna take the Prius for a drive, and which one are we in?
We are in a front-wheel drive XLE grade, and this one's about $34,000.
Now, the front-wheel drive is slightly down on power compared to the all-wheel drive.
2 horsepower less.
Yeah, okay.
It's gonna make a difference.
Very slightly down on power. That's exactly right. And it's also down on price a little bit.
Yeah, this is about $1,400 cheaper, which, I mean, if you want the all-wheel drive, it's really not that much more, but hell, this is going to get you a little bit better gas mileage as well.
Now, immediately, even just slowly and gently merging out of this main road, I can tell you that the power feels a lot more than the previous generation.
Yes, and that's what I was saying in my video is like, I feel like compared to the older Prius, people who drive Prius are going to get this and be like, this is like scary fast.
They're going to be alarmed, huh?
Yes, they will be.
Now, Sofian, immediately, the driving position in this car is very different than the old one. You feel like you sit kind of low and close to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, Toyota obviously made the roof a lot lower, so they had to change the driving position. What throws me off, though, is the really long windshield. It's very long and it has a very steep rake. Yes,
you're absolutely right, and it feels like you're kind of driving like the Kia EV6, right? Kind of a similar sensation, and it's definitely a different kind of vibe than what the old one gave you. Now, one thing which is also interesting is when you change drive modes, it really makes a pretty big difference in the steering weight.
Yes, and I feel like a lot of Toyotas have done that, but I feel like they're almost also just adding artificial heft to the steering weight, just to give you the impression it's sportier, but at least it does something, right?
So why do you think that Toyota went through all this effort to kind of make the Prius more useful, to kind of make it more stylish, right? Because it seems like the Prius has always been a very practical decision vehicle to buy. Why go through all this time and energy?
I mean, honestly, I think it's because Toyota has so many other options in their lineup. Like, if you want the most practical, you get the RAV4 hybrid. If you want the cheapest, you'll get the Corolla hybrid. If you want the more, like, conventional one, you'll get the Camry hybrid. So I think Toyota needed to move the Prius to a different market, which is why they wanted this to be a lot sleeker, a lot sportier. They wanted a younger buyer, probably somebody who doesn't have that many kids.
That's interesting, yeah. Let's see how the turning circle is. We've got this little circle. Oh, really good, actually. That was impressive. Now the road holding dynamics feel a lot better than the old one. It just feels a lot tighter. And I would say that the sound in here is pretty good too. It's not super loud on the highway.
Yeah, I think that because of the stronger electric motors, it just is able to use more of the electric power alone, so you're not having to deal with that droney engine all the time.
Yeah, 100%. That's right. And the seats are a lot better too than the old ones, so if you have to travel longer distance. Other thing too I like about it, Toyota Safety Sense 3.0 versus the 2.0. This is a lot more assertive on the highway in terms of like lane centering. So it's much more willing to kind of navigate around gentle turns in the highway.
Yeah, I think they definitely made improvements on that. Although Tommy, I know you don't like the forward cross traffic alert.
Yes, so it has this feature where it'll alert you of people kind of coming from the side. But the issue is, like, if I was going right now, as I kind of creep out in the intersection to see around this car, it's constantly beeping like, oh my God, you're going to hit on the side. And I'm not going to get hit on the side because I'm aware, but it's a little bit intrusive.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially if you have a bunch of passengers in the car. They're like, what's that noise? And you're kind of like, it's the car, it's not me.
So now that this car looks so good, and it does look really, really good, do you think it drives as good as it looks?
I think that it drives a lot better than the prior generation. I don't think it drives like a sports sedan, but it's certainly a huge improvement. So you kind of have to manage your expectations a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it. Yeah, it certainly is not like, oh wow, I want to go take this on a canyon road, but it also is not a dreary thing to drive around.
Right.
All right, Sophia, let's do a quick 0 to 60 test in the Toyota Prius. So we're going to come to a stop. We're going to merge onto this highway here. Are we ready?
Yep.
In 3, 2, 1. Sport mode engaged.
Hey, that actually felt pretty good off the line.
Takes off pretty well, right? 55 miles an hour there. All right, so my timer says 0 to 60 in 8 seconds even.
Right, which is strange because mine says 7.54. I don't understand the discrepancy.
So who makes your performance timer?
Mine is built by Racebox, and it's pretty new. It's like a year old.
And they're both GPS units. Ours, of course, is a solo DL. So it just goes to show that even with instrumented testing, there can be some variation, for sure.
Yeah. And honestly, Toyota should not be ashamed. This is a really quick time for a
right.
Prius.
Considering the old one was over a couple of seconds slower, it's pretty impressive. Now, hot take, all joking aside, I have actually genuinely loved every generation of Prius because in my mind, this car is equivalent to a 911 by Porsche in that it's specifically designed for one goal in mind, and that is fuel economy. And I love cars that are designed for a purpose, and that is what the Prius has always been. And now we've got a car that's designed for a purpose, but also drives pretty nice. It's pretty darn quick. It's got a nice inside. So I'm going with, heck yes, the Prius is cool, but Sophion?
I'm going to grudgingly admit that the Prius is now cool, and it's really all the changes Toyota has made. Like you said, Tommy, it's way quicker, it's way better looking, it's got a nicer interior. And aside from the reduction in the headroom, I think that's a sacrifice that most people are going to be willing to make. And if you need more space, Toyota will happily sell you a RAV4 hybrid, but I would agree, the Prius finally is cool again.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, guys, let us know what you think in the comment section below. What do you think of our hot take? As always, this has been Tommy.
And Sophion.
We'll see you on the next review.